Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is October 26th, and there are a lot of interesting news stories. In this episode, the US is preparing a new strike, but this time against the banking system of the Russian Federation. Orban is once again biting the hand that feeds him. And there's a new Kremlin playbook. Russian propagandists are now demanding the destruction of all major cities in Ukraine. Moscow may soon be left without gasoline. And also, how Trump is preparing a golden fleet against China. All this and more. Today's episode will have a lot of interesting things. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. The Donald Trump administration has prepared a draft of new sanctions against key sectors of the Russian economy. And these sanctions will be imposed if Moscow does not agree to end the war. Reuters reports this, citing their sources say these are not the same sanctions that Donald Trump has already announced and which will take effect in a month. Some of the restrictions in the new package may be aimed at Russia's banking sector and infrastructure. Well, what can you do? In other words, Donald Trump has decided to go all out here. If suddenly Putin isn't scared by these sanctions, if that's not enough for him, he already told journalists, let's wait and see. Let's see how he talks in 6 months. He immediately says, and I still have another package I do. In a month, I'll hit the banking system and the infrastructure that supports the supply of Russian oil. And Trump will probably wait a few weeks to observe Russia's reaction to the restrictive measures he's about to introduce. The peace summit in Budapest will take place, and Europe may find itself in a position, an observer from the outside. Who do you think this impudent person is? Did he make the statement while rubbing his membranous wings, the pterodactyl of the world? Yes, it's Orban, and Orban has become simply insolent lately. You can understand him. For Orban, losing power, and let me remind you, he has elections next year, and the opposition in Hungary is seriously gaining electoral ground. Well, for Orban, losing power is basically like packing his suitcase and heading off to Assad to join Yanukovych in the dictator's reserve near Moscow with Putin. Because when investigations begin into all these shadowy schemes, and really into everything, into the usurpation of power, the takeover of the media, well then there really won't be much room left. That is, if the opposition comes to power, and there's a good chance they will. That's why, of course, Orban has now taken an aggressive stance against Brussels. And let me quote Orban, when President Trump is in charge, deals get made. Meanwhile, Europe is busy moralizing itself into paralysis. The peace summit in Budapest will take place, and Europe may find itself watching from the sidelines, Orban wrote. The peace summit refers to a meeting between Donald Trump and Putin. That is, let me remind you, Trump himself already said, why should I even go there? And then Putin said, yeah, we didn't really want to go either, we weren't that eager to be in a trailing position. It's really quite astonishing. In my opinion, even in Russia, they don't criticize Europe as much as Orban does, while being in the European Union and receiving funds from European sources. Do you know who Orban reminds me of? He's like that type of employee who, when they first join a company, thanks everyone, is so nice and polite, tries to please everyone, makes contact with everyone, and tries to get along with all. But after a few weeks, or maybe months, they start to think the whole company revolves around them. The whole world he thinks he built up this company and that it only survives because of him. So, after some time passes, this employee just swells up to unbelievable proportions. I'm sure you've seen examples like this yourself. And of course, all their bosses are idiots, and only he knows what's what. Everything here depends on me. How did you even manage before? You were working without even understanding anything. In the end, it all ends very simply and predictably. The employee who starts weaving these intrigues and tries to split the team into factions gets kicked out. And as a parting shot, he always shouts something. You'll definitely hear about me again. You'll regret firing me. In the end, no one regrets it, and no one ever hears from him again. I'm curious how Orban now plans to impose sanctions against Lukoil and Rosneft. To circumvent them? Moreover, the Hungarian government has openly stated that they are working on ways to bypass these sanctions. Are you guys joking or what? And here, I also can't quite understand Donald Trump. The tough opposition hit the two largest Russian oil companies, but if you start saying, let's make an exception for this one and let's allow India too, there will be an exception for China as well. So then what's the point of these sanctions? Well, I think Orban is in for an unpleasant surprise. Then here's another statement from Orban. The conflict in Ukraine would already be over if Europe hadn't interfered with peacekeeping efforts. He said this at the peace march organized by his own government. What peace march? Where are you even marching? A peace march? Go on, walk along the front line over there. Orban, let me remind you, got scared. He didn't even want to go to Kyiv. He would never in his life go there to see up close how the Russians are pounding Ukrainian cities. He doesn't want to see that. But he does organize a peace march, though. Let's put it this way. The conflict would have ended if Europe hadn't interfered with peacekeeping efforts. Let's translate that into simple and clear language. If Ukraine hadn't been helped like this, yes, then Putin would have taken over Ukraine long ago, at least according to Orban. And that's that. That's what he's talking about. Oh, what a Danube fool, really. Just say it. Friends, we've closed the fundraiser. Let me remind you, we've closed the fundraiser for the legendary Azov, and now we have a new one. Well, we have a lot of them. They're in line right now. Unfortunately, they're moving more slowly, but they're moving, and for that I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who helps. Recently, an acquaintance of mine from the 117th Territorial Defense Brigade wrote to me. They're currently carrying out combat missions in the Donetsk region. Let me just share a couple of phrases from what he wrote. Lately, they're fighting near Lyman and Serebryanka. Recently, they've lost 2 vehicles, and this is a company of strike UAVs, unmanned aerial complexes. These are our drone operators, very skilled, very professional. But in order to get to positions, deliver supplies, and return, they need vehicles. And recently, they've lost 2 vehicles, which has made transportation and supply runs more difficult. And the activity of Russian drones there is such that it's extremely difficult to drive there because they're constantly being ambushed. He described to me that these are waiters. These drones just sit in the grass, in the bushes, and as soon as a car drives by on the road, they take off and immediately attack. So, yeah, that's how it is. And yesterday he wrote to me, a happy day, or relatively happy, because a Russian FPV drone hit their last vehicle, but it was a lucky day because everyone survived and no one was hurt except for the car itself and the electronic warfare system. In other words, everyone was born under a lucky star. There was an explosion. The FPV drone hit the roof right into the electronic warfare system. So yeah, and as one of the comrades said, in this case, the electronic warfare worked 100%. So, in fact, the electronic warfare system acted as a shield in this case. That's why they really asked for a vehicle and an electronic warfare system, and I think we can help them with that. These guys are really awesome, of all different ages. Some are young, some are over 50. Just incredible people. But it turns out that electronic warfare vehicles are now expendable material, unfortunately, and they constantly need to be replaced. So I ask you, friends, let's do this and help our warriors with this fundraiser. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There are options for Mono, Private, and PayPal. And there's also a QR code in case you don't see the link in the description. I always thank you immensely for every fundraiser, for every thank you from our fighters. We are a great force and we are doing something truly important. Now I'll tell you about the Russian propagandists. This is practically a declaration of war, said the Russian propagandist Mardan, admitting that Trump's sanctions are scarier than any weapon supplies. He promised to take revenge on ordinary Ukrainians for this. Well, who else could he possibly take revenge on? Well, it's not like he's going to threaten Trump or the United States. It's actually astonishing. On the air of one of the programs, he said that these sanctions will really be problematic for Russia. And he's convinced that in terms of damage, the sanctions will surpass all previous deliveries, even military aid to Kyiv. At the same time, he named the only possible response from Russia as, and I'm quoting verbatim, bombing Ukraine back to the 18th century, to destroy all of Ukraine's energy sector, its infrastructure along with its industry, and of course to destroy the major cities as well. There's one thing I just can't understand. Putin said that sanctions only make Russia stronger. So it turns out that Trump, with his sanctions, is giving Russia a powerful boost. Well then, go ahead, Russia. So sanctions are only beneficial. We'll substitute imports, and in general, we don't need all your markets anyway? Or will the economy not suffer after all? Or are sanctions worse than war? So make up your mind, where do you actually stand? Worse than war? Or is it actually good for us? And by the way, why should Ukrainian cities be bombed because of American sanctions? Isn't that an admission that Russia is absolutely toothless and powerless and can't even take half measures? It can't even respond to the US. Very scary. Go ahead, start threatening Washington more then. Well, what's stopping you? Don't be shy, what's the problem? Washington imposes sanctions and you're going to bomb Ukrainian cities? Well, and this propagandist Mardan, by the way, he's been asking for trouble for a long time. It feels like he's about to get what he deserves. I get the sense that the Ukrainian Mossad is watching him closely. They're keeping an eye on him. And apparently they've finally written a script for all the Russian propagandists, because not only Mardan, but also Solovyov has started saying the following. He was pleased that Putin's troops have started attacking civilian infrastructure more often, and he said that there shouldn't be a normal life in Ukrainian cities. In fact, he declared those cities where he says, yes, there is simply one people there. We need to get there now, reunite, and so on. Kyiv, Odessa, Poltava. He threatened to destroy these cities. This is exactly what Mardan says. The guidelines clearly came down from the Kremlin. And Solovyov said the following. There will be no life in Kharkiv, nor in Poltava, nor in Mykolaiv, nor in Odessa. There will be no such cities, there will be no Kyiv if the civilians do not overthrow their Nazi government, the speaker declared. A pile of talking heads, let's put it that way, just in case children are watching us. So now they're not a brotherly people at all anymore. Did you notice how they suddenly stopped loving Ukrainians, even though, as paradoxical as it sounds? They used to say, yes, we're coming now to save them. Yes, they're our brothers. Yes, we're coming, just wait for us. But this is what their victory looks like. So, in the 4th year of the war, all you can do is keep threatening strikes on Ukrainian cities over and over again. And notice this. No one even dares to threaten Washington anymore. And soon, people living in the city of Moscow will have to explain to others why the ongoing gasoline shortage has now reached them as well, because of the most effective and far-reaching sanctions that have been imposed. And these sanctions come from the power of Ukraine's drone systems, from Ukrainian drones, from the SBU, God's Service as we call it, from the GUR, and from the armed forces of Ukraine. These are the most effective sanctions. So it's because of these sanctions. Rosneft's largest oil refinery, which supplies fuel to Moscow, has shut down. That very Ryazan refinery, the one our drones hit on October 23rd. The largest plant of the Rosneft company. The largest, specifically Rosneft's, 13 million tons of oil per year, and it supplies Moscow, among others. Well, that's how it goes sometimes. War is coming back, creeping in with its clawed little fingers. It's getting closer and closer to Moscow. That's how it's closing in. What a great piece of news. I just couldn't pass it by. In the Kremlin, they've proposed bringing back to schools inkwells and slide rules to immerse children in the atmosphere of the past and of war. Well, you've already immersed these children in the atmosphere of the past, so you've decided to bring back these pens, inkwells, so the kids can try writing with a nib and ink, slide rules, like go ahead kids, try it out, see what it's like. Why not give them rotary phones too? Don't you think they're just getting kids used to rolling back to the Soviet past, cutting off the internet above them so there won't be any dissenters, and so they can't communicate with each other? So here you go, kids, rotary phones, slide rules. So here's the thing. They'll show the kids how Soviet children studied in the basements of cities during wartime. They'll also explain how to use a fountain pen. So basically, that's the initiative. It was launched, this initiative, by someone, Alexander Zhuravsky, deputy head of the presidential administration of the Russian Federation. This project is called Teachers of Victory. And he noted that the campaign is educational in nature. We have a poor understanding of how schools functioned, what a fountain pen and inkwell were for. After all kids now have ballpoint pens and so on and so forth. Also, according to this genius thinker, today's children have little idea of how schools operated during the war years and why schools were predominantly female. Well, for the same reason that even now, in many schools, In historical regions, this was the case because most of the male population was at the front, reported this genius thinker. Well then, can someone explain to me why they keep trying to immerse children in this wartime era? Children, you don't know how people lived back then, right? So now let's show you what it was like in blockaded Leningrad, let you feel what war was like. Why did you bring war to them at all? To these children. Many of these children, in fact, already don't have parents anymore. Some have lost uncles, some have lost their fathers too. You've basically decided to throw them into a real-life reality show, right into an actual war. Look, boy, so you understand what war really is. Uncle Putin will kill your father in the war, and you'll be sitting at the desk of heroes. And the desk of heroes is a kind of desk on which are photos of former students from this school who died ingloriously in Ukraine. He studied at this school, maybe later ended up in prison, was taken from prison to the front, or maybe he went for money like others did. And so he dies in Ukraine, and since he studied at this school, they make a desk out of him, a desk of heroes. Well, out of him? They stick his photo on this desk, and the most successful students are seated at these desks. Successful students. Just imagine, a first grader is sitting at the desk, and from that desk, this guy is squinting at him. Some ex-convict who was disposed of at the front. I think that by the end of the year, these children will be here for life. This is the face they remember, looking at them from this hero's desk. Yes, this is a great initiative. Well, can you imagine what a trauma it was? You know something else? In what and in what? This is the kind of evil genius we're dealing with. This whole system where children are practically indoctrinated with propaganda from kindergarten, these talks about what's important, the heroes' desks, some of these dim-witted combatants coming in. Some of them, by the way, even become teachers in schools. I can just imagine it. You know what the evil genius of all this is? That even if at home the child is told, this is wrong, this is war, you can't just go and kill people on someone else's land, just come and harm peaceful people like that. There are children just like you studying there. Even if they're told this at home, it's a guarantee. Kids are kids. They'll go to school, and the teacher will say, today we're going to talk about our heroes of this. Our, Russian war from recent history. Yeah, that's not really a war, that's nonsense. That's what my dad told me. After a while, they came for his dad, and now the child doesn't have a father. That's it. So a child can't even express their own thoughts at school, even if they're growing up in a reasonable family. That's why, it seems to me, the only way out is just to leave the Russian Federation. Yeah, Trump. Most likely, he'll name the new White House ballroom after himself. ABC News is reporting on this. But the publication's sources say that officials are already using the name President Donald Trump Ballroom. Trump hasn't made any public statements yet about what he plans to name the ballroom, but let me remind you that on Donald Trump's orders, an entire wing of the White House was demolished to build this ballroom. You know, when I was in Washington, the first thing that struck me was the distance. The distance. I mean, well, in Kyiv you can just walk from the city center somewhere in 20 to 30 minutes. Well, those are reasonable distances. But there, in Washington, you'll be walking for hours in one direction, then in the other. That's why I was struck by how spread out it is. And the White House also surprised me. It's kind of tiny, really. I was there in the summer, everything was green, that's how it was. You couldn't see it at all. I was like, where is it? Where's all that stuff you see in the movies? But I really liked Washington, it's very cool. Everything there is just on a grand scale. Yeah, by the way, speaking of Donald Trump's hall, I actually did a whole episode about the architecture of immortality, when rulers want to immortalize themselves in stone, bronze, glass, to leave behind something monumental, some kind of structures or significant infrastructure objects bearing their name. Napoleon, the Arc de Triomphe, Saddam Hussein. By the way, he was restoring Babylon. Do you know how he did it? He demolished the ruins of ancient Babylon. He suddenly imagined himself a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar Tao and tore down the ancient ruins to build his own structures in their place, that hideous new construction. And on every brick he wrote, Babylon restored by Saddam Hussein. But Donald Trump also has this kind of urge. I remember a video clip that was generated by artificial intelligence, which Donald Trump posted on his social media. This clip is about the Gaza Strip, about how Trump there, a super resort is being built, or rather, the super resort has already been built. Trump Tower Gaza, a central square, a giant golden statue of Donald Trump, and at the end, tourists buy gold-plated keychains with Donald Trump's image. And little busts as well, also gold-plated. So there's that kind of thing going on. Trump, of course, loves everything shiny. I think anyone who has seen his home decor understands this. And of course, Trump has a strong desire to win the Nobel Prize at any cost. It seems to me that this is really his ultimate goal. He has a great desire to go down in history. I'm not criticizing. Besides, well, some people like gold, some like, I don't know, silver, some prefer more modest tones, and others like something else. It's just that for Donald Trump, this is a characteristic feature of his psychotype, a narcissistic personality. Well, people who build things in their own honor sometimes leave behind quite impressive objects, or rather, often quite impressive because a huge amount of money is invested in them. The Arc de Triomphe is magnificent after all. The Egyptian pyramids, well, that's a bit different, but they're beautiful too. But there's a nuance. You can build something and name it after yourself, but it's a different matter when something is named after you later in gratitude for your outstanding achievements. But if Donald Trump manages to break the balding KGB pensioner from the Kremlin and bring a just end to the war, I would gladly support awarding him the Nobel Prize in every possible way. And one more thing. The Wall Street Journal reported on Trump's plans to create a golden fleet. The US wants to modernize its fleet so that it can effectively counter contemporary threats. The plans include increasing the number of large ships and corvettes with additional protection against drones. Makes sense. And Trump is planning to upgrade all of this and call it the Golden Fleet. This Golden Fleet is supposed to have the capability to counter threats from China. In other words, this Golden Fleet is being created against China. The plan is still at the initial discussion stage. It is assumed that this new fleet will include a number of large warships, more powerful long-range missiles, and smaller ships. In general, work is underway, and recently Trump stated that America, by the way, is entering a golden age. I think you've seen the decor of his office, which he called the Golden Office, for the Golden Age. So, it turns out that from the Golden Office, Donald Trump will be giving orders to the Golden Fleet for the Golden Age, and all of this is covered from above by the Golden Dome. But that's the ideal scenario, when everything is built. The Golden Dome. As they say, the Golden Domes warm my soul. Now, guess what the main color will be in the new ballroom? Write your guesses in the comments, and friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We are fighting against Russian propaganda, so let's have more people who want to know the truth. Also, subscribers claim that after subscribing to this channel, your hair really does become soft and silky, so make sure to subscribe. And now, our segment, I'm going to show you where the attack on Belarus was being prepared from. There was an interesting statement from the first deputy head of the Belarusian KGB, Terebov, who said that, as it turns out, in NATO countries, an army is being prepared to attack Belarus, with a force of between 9,000 and 15,000 people. Basically, the core of it will be Belarusian volunteers who are fighting for Ukraine. And in general, everyone wants to attack. They're preparing this army. It's long been known that Lukashenko's brain is a bit fermented and he's paranoid. His paranoia is at level 80. But you know, he's far from stupid. Although he constantly pretends to be some kind of village fool, a collective farm bumpkin, or even a holy fool from time to time. He understands that now he'll have to tighten the screws on the Belarusians. That's why he needs to say, look, there's an army in Poland, they're about to attack, so everyone needs to listen up and pay attention. By the way, that's already how things are in Belarus. Everything is being listened to completely. Public opinion is being prepared for preventive measures, so that the government and the KGB can tighten the screws. Basically, this is a signal within Belarus, and Lukashenko is getting ready to play the fortress defender. In other words, Belarus will now be presented as a besieged fortress, surrounded by enemies, and only Lukashenko can protect you. Well, nothing ever changes with these people. These old senile grandfathers who suddenly decided that the whole world needs to be destroyed just so they can go down in history. They will go down in history, but in a completely different way. And they will die ingloriously. That's if they even live to see The Hague, though I have serious doubts about that. Just look at how much Lukashenko's health has deteriorated during the war. Well, with Putin, it's unclear because those replicants are running around all over the Kremlin. They'll be rounding everyone up. As they say, the more we hand over to The Hague, the better. And you friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. And let's help our guys with this car and wrap. And I want to say a huge thank you to you. The payment details are in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.